Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's AdEspresso Office Hours. I'm Paul, and today I'm delighted to be joined by AJ Wilcox. Hi, AJ.
Hey, Paul, super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So for those that don't know AJ, he's basically the number one expert on LinkedIn ads. And I say that with all confidence. There's quite a few Facebook ads gurus, but not many on the LinkedIn side. So AJ's had a long experience with LinkedIn ads. He founded his ad agency B2 Linked in 2014. So 6 years experience there running ads on the agency side. Him and his team have handled incredible $130 million plus for LinkedIn ads. That's just an amazing figure there. And at least 4 of the top 10 largest advertisers on LinkedIn are handled through BT Linked. And recently, AJ, I think you've started your own podcast as well, the LinkedIn Ads podcast show.
Yeah. Love the LinkedIn Ads Show. We're at, I think, episode 34 right now as of recording.
Awesome. So today we're going to be giving you a brief intro, like dipping our toe into the water for LinkedIn ads. I know a lot of people watching this, especially AdEspresso customers, are super familiar with Facebook and Instagram ads. And you're probably thinking, okay, are there any other platforms worth trying? Should I be looking at LinkedIn ads or any of the other options out there? There's so many social media platforms. So we're just going to have a brief intro into the world of LinkedIn ads today. So AJ, probably first question is, what sort of businesses should be looking at LinkedIn ads? Does it apply to every business, or does it work for B2B or B2C, or is there a certain niche or industry that's best there?
Yes, super important question. What we find is the reason that you would go to LinkedIn is the targeting is so good around business professionals. We can target by job title and seniority and company size, industry, just like Facebook, we can target by email address, but we can also target by company name. So your targeting is amazing, but the big downside is, boy, do we pay for that targeting. The average cost per click on the network right now is between $8 to $11. And coming from Facebook, where you might be paying $1 to $3 per click, it's a huge differential. So because you're paying so much upfront for that traffic, we tell people you want to make sure that your lifetime value is of closing a customer is at least $15,000, because you'll probably end up spending between $1,000 to $4,000 to acquire a customer in ads, and then you want to make sure you've got like at least a 3-4x ROI. So yeah, I think those who should consider it, any sort of like high value lead gen, definitely should consider it. But also white collar recruiting works quite well because LinkedIn really is it started out as kind of a jobs network. And the third is higher education, like MBA programs who are recruiting new candidates.
Yeah, so you're probably more on the B2B side and just things like courses, software, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's good to know that. I suppose you're suggesting that if you're doing just general everyday consumer products, LinkedIn ads is probably not the place for you there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in fact, one of my favorite things to do is dissuade people from using the LinkedIn ads platform, because if it's not going to work for them, I don't want them out like yelling and screaming in the across the internet like this doesn't work, and I certainly don't want them competing with my clients in the auction. So if it's not going to be a good fit, like definitely stay out.
No, so that's really important, and it's the same with any other social media platform. They've all now got really good at finding their niches, that certain demographic, and if it's not the right demographic for you, then there's no point in paying for that. So imagine that a business out there is already running their Facebook and Instagram ads. I think now Facebook ads been around for about 10 years, probably mainstream in the last 4 or 5 years. There's 10 million Facebook advertisers. So most businesses would have at least dabbled with Facebook ads or spending, medium to significant amount there. So when's the time to start considering LinkedIn? Do you recommend, if you just start out with advertising, do you go LinkedIn first, or do you try Facebook first? Do you later transition all from Facebook to LinkedIn, or do you like blend the two together? What's your kind of advice there on how to get started with LinkedIn ads?
Oh man, I have so much to say on this, but I'll try to keep it short. I would say I'm big on performance. I'm big on getting the lowest cost per whatever it is you're looking for. So if I were to approach, brand new company, I don't have any ad channels running, I would first go to Facebook and I would run any sort of custom audiences that I could. If I had, collected some kind of list, I would run retargeting, and I would run lookalikes off of whatever lists or audiences that I already had. That would be number one, because that's the lowest hanging fruit. Then as long as I fit that criteria of, I have a high lifetime value of a customer, then I would probably go to LinkedIn and take advantage of their native targeting and get more people, more of the right people to my website for Facebook to retarget. And then after that, I would expand into Facebook's more general targeting and see if I could find any pockets of my ideal audience.
Okay, so you're kind of riffing off the two there. Start on Facebook just because it's cheap. You can get quite broad targeting. Go more specific on LinkedIn, use those learnings, and then you can go more broad again on Facebook. Plus, you've got that retargeting, as you say, that Facebook retargeting is very specific, that you can retarget, say, website visitors within 7 days when they've just visited your site after clicking on a LinkedIn ad. You can then retarget them, chase them around the web. So that's really good. Sometimes we get it a lot with Facebook versus Google. They think that the two are rivals, but they actually work really, really well together. So same with Facebook and LinkedIn there.
Exactly. Yeah. Google and Facebook. I mean, you have Facebook that should be all really areas of the funnel. You have Google that plays so well bottom of funnel, and they work so well together. I mean, I betray myself all the time by saying this. LinkedIn's retargeting just isn't very good. But so for all of our clients, we're recommending use LinkedIn to get exactly the right qualified traffic to your site, but then use Google and Facebook's retargeting in tandem to stay in front of them in a really smart way. But Facebook has a huge advantage. Facebook's retargeting platform is by far the best in the world. And, with both LinkedIn and Google, it takes us at least 300 people in an audience before we can start running ads. And last time I checked, Facebook was like 20. Yeah. So if you're paying $8 to $11 a click to get someone somewhere, you don't want to pay that for 300 visitors before you can start retargeting them. Facebook's campaigns are going to be running way earlier.
And then, once people are thinking, okay, I'm going to allocate some budget to LinkedIn, where do they start with ad types? Now, those of us that started back in the day on Facebook, it was all about boosting posts. I started Facebook, I got a $25 coupon credit and boosted some posts. This is going back in 2011, 2012. Now, when you go on LinkedIn, you hear a lot about sponsored email. There's these little kind of sidebar text-only ads. There's your sponsored post that you see in the feed. So first question is kind of, where do you start? Like, you've got to start somewhere. Where do you start on there? And then also, what's your objective? Like, should it be just top of the funnel engagement? Should it be leads? Should it be conversions? I know this is a really wide open question, but there's where do people get started there?
Perfect. So ad format wise, I would recommend that everyone starts with what LinkedIn calls their single image sponsored content. It's a newsfeed ad, which means a lot of people are going to see it because the newsfeed is the default experience on both desktop and the mobile app. And it's a good combination of things. It's not the most expensive and it's not the least expensive click, but it's getting in front of a lot of people. So I would start there for sure. But if you've got a really limited budget, you should know that over in the right rail, what we call text ads are by far LinkedIn's cheapest. You can bid all the way down to $2 per click. You'll probably end up paying between like $3 to $5 per. But because it's right rail, very similar to Facebook, where the majority of users are on mobile and the right rail is only available on desktop. So if you have a tiny, tiny budget, you might be able to spend it, but usually you've got to supplement with some kind of sponsored content. And then for the type of objective that you're using, LinkedIn's got actually copied Facebook on the objectives. So you have all the same kinds of things. It'll ask you, like, do you want to do lead gen, or do you want to do website visits or conversions? My recommendation is start with website visits and get the traffic to your website so you can retarget them with Facebook and track them properly. But when you're thinking about actual objectives, like what you as an advertiser want, on Facebook, you have this luxury of the costs are so low that you can really slowly transition people into your funnel. You can pay to send them to your blog content, just things that are interesting, and you can kind of warm them up that way. But because LinkedIn is 8 to 11 bucks per click, we can't make a good case for ROI in sending people to a blog post that just isn't going to convert and isn't really trackable. So where we shoot for is really more of what we'd probably consider the middle of the funnel. It's targeting your ideal audiences who are cold with something that is gated, but they would find insanely valuable. So the best types of content we found are things like, a free webinar, a free ebook or cheat sheet or checklist, guide, free in-person event, those kinds of things. And just make sure that they're juicy enough that someone's actually willing to fill out the form. And then you can begin nurturing from there.
Excellent. And what's your view on inbound? I think some people get very excited about the idea of being able to like get into somebody's inbox directly there. Is that something you use? Is it something you would start off with, or is that a more advanced targeting option?
Yeah, so we have two different message options with LinkedIn. One comes across as kind of like a sponsored in-mail, and that's called a message ad. And we have one that's called a conversation ad. Very, very like early days of similar to what Facebook can do through Messenger. And these seem really sexy. Like you can pay to give it to someone, put it directly in their inbox, and they're likely to see it. The big challenge though is it sure seems inexpensive when you're paying 20 to 50 cents per person that you send it to. But if you actually do the math and figure out based off of averages, only 55% of people who receive it are going to open. And then on average, 3.2% of people will click on whatever call to action you have. So you do that math and you're at like 28 to 50 something dollars per convert or per click. Sorry, not conversion. And so we run a lot of them, but we reserve them for very special kinds of offers because not everything is worth paying $25 a click for.
And with targeting, maybe just briefly run through some of the options, especially if there's some that you wouldn't find on Facebook. Like the real downside with Facebook is people just don't put in their job titles. So are you targeting by job titles or seniority, or like a lot of people want to target CEOs or C-suite? Like how would you kind of go about those things?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is amazing this way. We break our targeting down usually into 4 categories. Most prospects we can reach 4 different ways, and that gives us freedom to find what's the way that's the cheapest, which is the way that delivers the highest lead quality, and those types of things. So the first category is by job title. It makes a lot of sense, but because job title is a free form field, we can write whatever we want. LinkedIn doesn't understand everyone's job title to put them in an ad category. But then there's job function, which is like someone's department with a level of seniority. There's skills with seniority, and then there's groups with seniority as well. As opposed to Facebook, on LinkedIn, we can target members of groups. Like if I'm trying to reach people who use SAP software, I can go and target any group that has SAP in the name, and I'm probably going to get those kinds of people. And those are our like 4 main ones. And then we're always going to tack on either a company size, a company name, or an industry on there as well to kind of tighten the targeting. And what's so great about this, especially when you're used to Facebook, is LinkedIn has all this information at near perfect scale. I mean, if someone's on LinkedIn, they've got this data on them. And so you might struggle to reach the 5% of people on Facebook who decided to put in a job title, but on LinkedIn, you've got 98% of the white collar workforce.
And I think it's also kept up to date a lot. I think it's been said that people, if they're changing jobs, tell their spouse. Second thing they do is tell LinkedIn. So
yes,
very very good for that. And do you find it's useful for targeting senior level people? Like this is on Facebook, everybody wants to target CEOs, but that kind of market gets saturated very quickly. Do you find is there any kind of little tips that you've got there? Is it useful, or do you like target people slightly lower down in organizations?
Yeah, we actually find that targeting people all across company sizes, all across seniorities are all really successful. We've run quite a few campaigns targeting just like the CEOs of the Fortune 500. And of course, that doesn't create a very large audience, but we do see clicks. They are a little bit more competitive. You'll pay more for them. So yeah, when it comes down to tips, just I suggest, because you're paying so much for LinkedIn clicks, go absolutely to your core, like the group that would make the biggest benefit to you as a company. And that's usually a good place to start. It's really easy to reach CEOs by job title. It's really easy to reach the C-level seniority by using the seniority filter. So yeah, lots of good stuff you can do.
Great. Sounds a lot better than Facebook. When we've analyzed it before, there's something like 1,000 CEOs of Nike listed, and that's just under 18s. Every kid on Facebook says they're the CEO of Nike or Apple. It's a bit more accurate on LinkedIn there. So before we kind of wrap up, what suggestion do you have for people with budgets as a daily budget? And I've also noticed that LinkedIn's quite lenient about how much it spends either side. Like when I've tested it, it's more or less spent double the daily stated budget. So kind of what's your estimated starting budget, and what's the real world budget that LinkedIn will spend for you there?
Yeah, so LinkedIn requires that you have a budget of at least $10 per campaign per day. So immediately, like Dennis Yu's dollar a day strategy just wouldn't work on LinkedIn. It's because it's got to be like $10 a day. And with LinkedIn's cost per click, I mean, that's one click per day. It's just not a great fit. And just like Google, LinkedIn will allow themselves to spend up to 20% over your daily budget that you set. So, and they say that they'll kind of even it out at the end, but they don't always. So if you ever do like overspend your budget by double, contact support, because they will usually refund you for that, because that is a mistake. I tell people, make sure that you're allocating around $5,000 a month, because to testing LinkedIn, because we find that it's usually around that spend range when your conversion rates and your cost per conversion become statistically significant. And if you're working with an agency like ours, where you're going to pay them to manage your ads, it'd sure be nice after like one round of testing to say, oh yes, this is working, or no, this sucks, we should fire AJ. So I recommend get enough leads in that you can actually tell that the quality is high and see the impact on the business.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like to really, you got to make a real conscious decision. If you're going to be testing LinkedIn, you've got to put some proper budgets there. So just before we wrap up, I'm sure people will have some questions or want to learn more about LinkedIn ads. So how can people contact you, or where's the best way to get some more resources from you there?
Oh, sure. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you'll probably really appreciate listening to the LinkedIn ads show. So go and subscribe on whatever podcast player you have. We get geeky like this. Like, it's really, really deep on LinkedIn ads. So if this has been interesting for you, I think you'll like the podcast. If you go to our website, b2linked.com, the letter B, the number 2, and then the word linked.com, I'm really easy to get a hold of. Just fill out the form on any of those pages, and those emails, they don't go to a sales rep. They just go directly to me, and I'm not a sales guy. So feel free to ask whatever you want.
That's great. Thanks for joining us today, AJ.
Absolutely, Paul. I'll have me back anytime.
Thank you.